Welcome everyone. I hope this finds you well. So we've been talking a lot about the 1930s, the Great Depression, the rise of the fascist states, the move to Hitler to be in power in Germany. In this video, I want to talk about the move to World War II. One of the important things to keep in mind is that German foreign policy did not appear very aggressive at first. And so we have to be very careful in this time period to watch our 2020 hindsight vision and to make sure we're understanding how people in the time period would have understood these developments. Remember, World War I was the war to end all wars, and many people assumed that no one wanted a major European war again because of all the destruction that had happened in the First World War. So in 1934, Germany and Poland actually signed a non-aggression treaty. Each side says that they're not going to attack the other, which seems like a good peaceful move on all hands. Now, in 1935, Hitler announces significant increases to the German military budget. Now, you may remember that the Treaty of Versailles had limited Germany's military budget quite significantly. But Hitler argues this is actually just to create jobs. It's a jobs program. On top of that, many people by the 30s felt that maybe the Treaty of Versailles had been a bit unfair. And so the fact that Germany was putting German troops in Germany did not seem particularly unreasonable or threatening, especially when everyone's really distracted by the problems of the Great Depression. And in 1936, Hitler remilitarizes the Rhineland, and that's that strip of land that's on the border with France, the Netherlands, and Belgium. You can see it in the map here. So again, that's actually German territory. So basically, many people in Europe don't want to go to war because the Germans have put German military bases in Germany. Many people are just focused on trying to survive the horror of the Great Depression. Now, in this early period, it's also, I want to raise this little controversy that happens. So when Hitler put troops into the Rhineland, reoccupied the Rhineland, basically, the British just are like, we're not getting involved. The Americans are in isolation. And although this does break the Treaty of Versailles, as I just mentioned, there's not much of a response. Now, it used to be, historians 40 years ago would have argued that this was the best opportunity to stop Hitler. And if France and Britain had just moved, that would have ended it all and World War II never would have happened. That is not what historians today argue. The German troops did have orders to respond if the French had blocked them. And so you could have actually potentially triggered off a war in that stage. And it actually is a much more controversial and difficult situation. We have a lot more documents from the German side to kind of know how things were happening. So I did just want to say, sometimes older history textbooks might really push on this idea that if the British and French had just responded in 36, World War II would never have happened. And that's actually not really what's argued today. The next move that Hitler is doing in 36 and 37 is to form an anti-communist agreement with Japan and Italy. So the three countries, Japan and Italy and Germany, are going to try to stop the spread of communism, which basically it's just an anti-USSR policy because that's the only communist country in existence at this stage. Now, the British, the French, the Americans are not exactly pro-communist either, so this was not seen as anything that was really negative. By 1938, Hitler is really pushing on this idea that all Germans should be in Germany, which we've been talking about this idea that all members of an ethnic group should be in the same country and should be ruled by their own people. So that's beginning to happen. And also this issue that the Germans are going to need growing room to the east. Now this was in Mein Kampf, and we talked a bit about Mein Kampf earlier, so this isn't really new ideas for Hitler. So in March 1938, Germany invades into Austria. But as you saw in the little bit of film, that actually was relatively popular for many people. So I don't really care what Sound of Music says. Most people in Austria were very happy about this because now Germans were being ruled by Germans, right? German Austria got to join in to create this larger Germany, which was a relatively popular thing. And again, the fact that the many people in Austria wanted this meant that you didn't really see a significant response by the British or the French. At this point in time then in 38, Czechoslovakia becomes the real problem. Now we've talked a bit about Czechoslovakia as one of the new nations that was created at the end of World War I. But Czechoslovakia's borders were placed in some kind of funny areas, and a lot of people ended up in Czechoslovakia who were neither Czech nor Slovak. So I'm going to give you some numbers here. I'm not going to test you on these. I just want you to see what's happening here. So while there are 7.5 million Czechs in Czechoslovakia and 5 million Slovaks, there also are 3.25 million Germans. And those people, those Germans in Czechoslovakia, do not want to be ruled by Czechs or Slovaks. There's also a pretty large Hungarian minority and also 90,000 Poles. So these people all don't want to be part of Czechoslovakia, the Germans, the Hungarians, and the Poles. And for the Germans who live in Czechoslovakia, they just saw what happened in Austria, that you've just kind of had this merger of Austria and Germany, so that all these Germans are living in Germany. And so as we come into May of 1938, there's actually a war crisis. The people in the Sudetenland, that area of Czechoslovakia that is majority German, are wanting to break from Czechoslovakia and join Germany. And in many ways, this seems like national self-determination, which is part of what World War I was even fought for. So people actually are beginning to blame Czechoslovakia because Czechoslovakia says, you know, if you want to be under German control, you know how you're under German control? You move to Germany. That's how you get under German control. But this is Czechoslovakia, and therefore it's going to remain Czechoslovakia. So this issue here is that Czechoslovakia kind of seems like part of the problem. Now, Hitler's also part of the problem, so I don't want to say that people aren't beginning to see him as a little aggressive here. In September, in the Sudetenland, there are actually riots, German people arguing to be able to have that territory become German. And Czechoslovakia declares martial law. And there's another war scare, the fact that Europe might be dragged into war because of the alliance systems. And so this is why Germany, France, Italy, and Britain meet in Munich to try to figure out a way to negotiate a settlement so that there's not a war at this stage. Notice who's not at the table here, Czechoslovakia. So they're going to go and decide what to do. And basically what happens in the Munich agreement then is that Sudetenland, that area that's majority German, is going to go to Germany. Go to Germany and become part of Germany. Now there are Czechs and Slovaks and other people in that area too. They're not particularly happy about this, but the Germans are. I also want to say that soon after this, there's also some additional territorial adjustments. So parts of Czechoslovakia go to Poland, the majority Polish areas, and also some territory goes to Hungary. So there's a series of adjustments. It's not simply the Sudetenland that happens here. Now I want to talk for just a moment about the appeasement controversy. So even in World War II, there's going to be this accusation that there should have been this stronger response, especially by 38, to what Hitler was doing. But again, everyone's assuming to some extent that the aim here is to avoid war and that you need to be negotiating. Now, we can look back from our 2020 vision perspective and know that Hitler actually was wanting to kind of conquer Europe, and that none of this was going to be enough to stop him. But that's a kind of unfair perspective. it's not entirely sure that you could have avoided war at any point during this whole issue. And talking to the other side, trying to reach a compromise, did seem to be a good approach for many people. And so this issue is going to, later on, this will be appeasement. And as we go into the post-World War II period, this idea that you should never appease, that you should never try to reach negotiation, will be the argument some people will make in terms of what foreign policy should look like. But just because maybe the appeasement was not the right approach here, whether it was or not is under debate, does not necessarily mean that means you should never talk to the other side for the rest of your foreign policy. And that'll really shape the Cold War and the visions of each side about how you might negotiate or work. And so basically there's going to be this big pushback against appeasement, this issue of talking or negotiating to the other side, with the idea that what you really needed to do was to hit back against aggression. And that would have stopped Hitler or whoever your enemies are as you go forward in time. But by 1938 then, seems to be, at least in September, that maybe war has been avoided and that Hitler should have what he wants now. And most Germans are now under German control.